It's time to get your hands dirty. Let's put those trees in the ground. Out of all the things involved in establishing a pecan orchard, planting the trees is probably my favorite. Now, if you've bought your trees or you're about to go pick them up, that should mean that your site's cleared out and ready to go, and you've made an informed decision on the spacing and the variety of trees you're about to plant. And hopefully you've made plans to irrigate them. If you need help with those topics, be sure and check out our other videos. We'll be floating them around up top here. No matter if you decided on potted trees or bare root, getting them in the ground is really about the same process. I just start by digging a hole that's slightly larger than the root system. I then trim or fluff up that root system that's needed, and then I set that tree in the hole, and then I start to backfill it with dirt and water. Remember, if it's a potted tree, make sure you fluff out that root ball and trim back that taproot, especially if it's curling in there. If it's bare root, don't be afraid to trim back some of those little lateral roots. You don't want them climbing up out of the hole, and you don't want them to start to kind of inbound inside that hole. And that taproot, don't stick it down in there and let it point back out of the top. Either dig your hole a little deeper or just trim that sucker off. When it comes to filling back in that hole, make sure you keep a close eye on that stained or discolored area that indicates where that tree used to sit in the soil. When you're putting that tree back in its new hole, you want to try to plant it at the same height that it used to be at the nursery or in its pot. Trees planted too deep or too shallow can have a lot of problems that develop down the road. This is why I like to use water when I'm planting my trees. I feel like that water forces those air pockets out. It causes that soil to go in and settle around those roots, and it makes sure that that tree stays at the height that you planted it. You don't want that thing settling over the next few weeks because you didn't get all your air pockets out when you planted it. Use that little discolored green, keep that thing level with the surface of the soil. When I was planting my last group of bare root trees, I found it very helpful just to go ahead and fill up a large barrel of water and have it in the back of my truck so that I could work the water that I needed for each individual tree right there on the spot. Also, it was a real sunny day and I started to worry that my trees were drying out. So I just went ahead and threw them in that barrel and let them soak while they waited on their turn to be planted. Some people will form a little donut ring around the tree once they're done planting it to try to funnel that water down towards the root zone. I don't really get too carried away here, but I do try to favor the shape around that tree to make sure that that water is staying near that young tree. At this point in the game, there's a couple more tips to keep in mind. If you planted bare root trees, this is a great time to go ahead and head them back. To do that, simply snip off the stem right above a good bud. As far as fertilizer goes, if you're planting bare root, hold off on fertilizing them for now. If you see good growth this summer, then you can start. If you planted potted trees, ask the nursery that you bought them from what they recommend as far as fertilizing goes. And when it comes to heading them back, if it's the dormant season, I'm gonna go ahead and do it. But if that tree is showing a lot of good growth, this is in the middle of summer or something, I'm only gonna trim back a few branches here and there to kind of match what I had to trim off of the roots during that fluffing process. In other words, try to kind of balance what you trim off the roots with what you trim from the branches. If you have a lot of deer or rodents around your orchard, I would go ahead and put on grow tubes or some sort of protective cage. Now, I know this can add a lot of cost to a project like this, but try to think of it as insurance, because those deer and little critters, they can do a lot of damage just in one night. It happened to me once. Deer got a taste for some of my chestnut trees, that young tender growth. Vulnerable stuff hanging out above that cage. Little chinchy cage I put on there, trying to be cheap. Came in one night, no big deal. It'll outgrow it. You know, life's tough. Come in the next day, 25 of them, I forget, eaten totally off. That deer was at a candy shop. Could have been prevented. There's really not a lot to planting a young pecan tree. Just make you a little game plan before you get out there, and I bet you'll have a great time. I'm Silas Dudley. Thanks for following the Nut Dynasty on our BagANut channel.